The day I finally felt free was the same day my sister's husband sent me a text that said, "You've done enough. We don't need your help anymore. Don't contact us." I stared at my phone for a long time. My hands were still wrapped in a tensor bandage from where I'd sprained my wrist 3 days earlier. Not from a fall, not from an accident at work, but because my sister's husband had shoved me hard enough to send me into the edge of a granite countertop in the kitchen of the house I was helping them buy. I read his text one more time. Then I opened my laptop, logged into my RBC online banking, and began the process of withdrawing as the co-signer on their mortgage application. It took 11 minutes. That was 6 weeks ago. Last Thursday, I got a call from my mother telling me that the mortgage had fallen through, that the builder had kept their $35,000 deposit under the terms of the purchase agreement, and that my sister had been crying for 4 days straight. I told my mother I was sorry to hear that. Then I hung up and went back to my life, the quiet, unbothered, genuinely peaceful life I'd been slowly rebuilding since the moment I decided I was done. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is not important, but what I do is, I'm a registered nurse, 31 years old, working at a hospital in Calgary. I've worked there for 8 years. I do 12-hour shifts, sometimes nights, sometimes weekends, and I have spent the better part of my adult life being reliable, being steady, being the person people call when things go wrong. My sister. I'll call her by what she's always been to me. My younger sister is 26. She's sweet, or she used to be, and I say that with genuine grief because I do believe somewhere under everything that happened, the girl I grew up with is still in there. But for the past 3 years, she has been completely consumed by the man she married at 24, a man I'll call my brother-in-law, and everything she says, everything she does, every decision she makes passes through him first. My brother-in-law works in sales. He is charming in the way that some people are charming loudly. On purpose. With an audience in mind. He tells stories that are always slightly more impressive than they should be. He has opinions about everything, an expertise in nothing. When my sister first brought him home for Thanksgiving, he spent 45 minutes explaining to my father how he should have invested his RRSP differently. My father has a master's degree in economics. He smiled and nodded, and later told me quietly that he didn't trust the man. My father died 18 months later. A stroke, sudden, in the parking lot of a grocery store in Airdrie. He was 63 years old. After he died, things changed in the way they do when the person holding a family together is suddenly gone. My mother, who had never managed the finances alone, was overwhelmed. My sister, who had always leaned on my father emotionally, fell apart, and my brother-in-law stepped into that vacuum with the confidence of someone who had been waiting for exactly this opportunity. Within 3 months of my father's death, my brother-in-law had become the person my mother called for advice. He helped her sort through the estate paperwork or so, he said, though later I would find out he'd gotten a few things quite wrong. He positioned himself as the man of the family in a way that made my skin crawl, but that my grieving mother found comforting, so I said nothing. He started calling our family home the property in conversations, like it was an asset he was already mentally cataloging. My sister, during this period, told me once over the phone that she felt so grateful she had him, that she didn't know what they would have done without him. I remember thinking, what do you mean we? But I let it go. The first time they asked me for money was 8 months after my father died. It was a Thursday evening, and my sister called me, which was unusual, because by then she mostly texted. She said they were having a hard time. She said my brother-in-law's commission structure had changed at work, and their cash flow was tight for the month, and could I help with groceries, just temporarily. She said it like it was a small thing, casual, like borrowing a sweater. I sent her $400 via e-transfer that same night. It was not a one-time thing. Over the next year and a half, I gave them money 11 separate times, never the same amount. Sometimes it was for groceries, sometimes it was a car payment. Once it was because they'd gotten a notice about their hydro bill and were worried about disconnection. Every time, my sister called and explained, and every time, my brother-in-law was audible in the background, not saying much, just present. I told myself I was helping my family. I told myself my father would have wanted me to look after them. I told myself it was temporary. The total, across those 11 transfers, was just over $14,000. I want to be clear that I did not keep a running tally at the time. I was not strategic about it. I am a nurse, and I make a decent salary, and I've always been frugal by nature. I rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. I cook most of my own meals. I don't take expensive vacations, and I genuinely believed I was doing what family does. It was only later, when I sat down and went through my bank statements, that I understood the full scope of what had moved from my account to theirs. The shift happened quietly, the way most things that matter do. It started about 18 months after my father died, when my brother-in-law announced at a family dinner that they were thinking about buying a house. This was presented as exciting news, as a milestone, and my mother was thrilled. My sister glowed. My brother-in-law talked about equity and appreciation, and the Calgary market, and how they needed to move fast before rates went up again. He said it with the authority of someone who had done extensive research, though I would later learn he had done approximately 2 hours of scrolling on a real estate app. What he did not mention at dinner, what my sister mentioned to me privately, 2 weeks later, in a way that felt rehearsed, was that they didn't have enough for a down payment, that the minimum they needed was $50,000, that they had about $18,000 saved, and that they were wondering if I might be willing to help. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I had just over $60,000 in a TFSA at that point, money I had saved carefully over 8 years of nursing, money I thought of as my future, a safety net. Maybe a down payment of my own someday. Giving them $32,000 would wipe out more than half of it. But my mother called, and she said, gently, the way she always says the things that are hardest to refuse, that my father had always believed in family, taking care of family, that he would have wanted us to help, that my sister was struggling, and I was in a position to make a real difference. She didn't ask me directly. She didn't have to. I transferred $32,000 to my sister's account on a Sunday afternoon in March. I told myself, this is the last big thing. After this, we're even. After this, things stabilize. What happened instead was that the requests changed shape. The down payment turned into something else. Because once they had it, there was suddenly a new problem. They had found a semi-custom build in a new development in Cochrane, and the base price was manageable. But the upgrades, the kitchen package, the flooring, the finished basement were not included. My brother-in-law came to me directly this time. Not through my sister. He sat across from me at a Tim Hortons and showed me a quote on his phone and said they wanted to add the upgrades to the build cost, but the lender would only approve the base mortgage, and they were short by $22,000. And he wanted to know if I would co-sign. Not give the money, co-sign. He explained it carefully, the way he always explains things slowly, like I might not understand. With a lot of jargon, and a lot of confidence. He said co-signing just meant my name on the application, that it wouldn't affect my credit meaningfully, that they would handle every payment, that I would never actually have to do anything. He said it like it was a formality. I should have said no. I have gone over this moment in my mind many times since. I should have said no right there at that Tim Hortons, over a coffee I hadn't wanted but ordered anyway, to have something to do with my hands. Instead, I said I needed to talk to someone first, and he said, of course, take your time, and he smiled the smile of someone who already knows the answer. I talked to a friend from work, another nurse who is sharper about money than anyone I know. She told me co-signing a mortgage is not a formality. She told me it appears on your credit bureau as a liability. She told me that if they ever miss a payment, it is my credit score on the line, and that if they default, the bank can come after me for the full amount. She told me to think very carefully. I went back to my brother-in-law and told him what I'd learned, and said I had concerns. He had an answer for all of them. He said their payments would be $1,800 a month, and that was easily manageable on their combined income. He said his commission was picking up. He said interest rates would come down. He said I was overthinking it, and then my sister texted me that night and said she really hoped I would do this for them, that it would mean everything, that she would never forget it. I co-signed the mortgage application in April. The approval came through in May. The possession date was set for late October. Between May and October, something changed in my brother-in-law. Or maybe it didn't change, maybe I just started seeing it more clearly. He became less careful with me. Less polite. Like the performance of gratitude he'd been maintaining was no longer necessary because the thing he wanted was already secured. He started making comments at family dinners. Small ones, the kind that could always be explained away as jokes. If I mentioned my apartment, he'd say something about how it was cozy with a particular emphasis. If I mentioned saving money, he'd make a remark about how some people are too scared to actually live. Once, in front of my mother, he said that it was funny how I'd given them all this help, but had nothing to show for it. My mother laughed uncomfortably. My sister stared at her plate. I started dreading family events. In July, they asked for more. The builder had flagged some issues with the lot, and there were additional grading costs, and they were short by $6,000. My brother-in-law texted me directly this time. No coffee, no meeting, no performance. Just a message with a number and a deadline. I sent the money because by then I had the sick feeling that if I didn't, something would unravel in a way I wasn't prepared to deal with yet. In August, they asked for another $4,500 for something to do with appliances. because apparently the package they'd upgraded to didn't include a refrigerator that met my sister's standards for her content creation setup. My sister wanted to start a lifestyle blog. I sent the money. I was, by this point, operating on something close to autopilot. I was not okay. I was working my shifts, coming home to my apartment, staring at my bank statements, and telling myself this would all be over after possession date, after they had the house, after things settled down. I stopped talking about it to my friend from work because I was ashamed. I knew what she would say. The day everything collapsed was a Wednesday in early October, 3 weeks before the scheduled possession date. My sister asked me to come out to Cochrane to see the house. The build was nearly complete, and she wanted me to walk through it with her. She texted me in the morning, and she sounded like her old self, warm and excited. And I thought maybe things were okay. Maybe I'd been building this up in my head. Maybe it would be fine. I drove out after my shift. I was tired. I was wearing my scrubs. I had not slept well in weeks. My brother-in-law was already there when I arrived. That surprised me. I thought it was just going to be the two of us, my sister and I. He was standing in the front entrance with a property agent I didn't recognize, and my sister was showing me through the kitchen when my brother-in-law came in and said he wanted to talk to me about something. He said it casually, like a side note. The something was this. They had found a development 2 streets over that had one remaining lot with a walkout backing onto a ravine, and the builder was offering a promotion, and my brother-in-law wanted to know if I would be willing to transfer my co-signing commitment to a new application for a different, more expensive property. The price difference was $90,000. He said it the same way he always says things. Confident, explanatory, slightly impatient, like he was doing me a favor by walking me through it slowly. I looked at my sister. She was looking at the kitchen island. I said no. I said it quietly, and I said it clearly. I said I was not going to co-sign a new application for a higher amount, that I had stretched myself far beyond what I was comfortable with, and that what we had agreed to was the arrangement we were going to keep. My brother-in-law's expression changed. What came after happened fast. He raised his voice. He said I was being selfish, that I had been involved this far, and was now pulling back when they needed me most. He said I had benefited from my father's estate too, and had no right to sit on money while my sister struggled. He said, and I remember this clearly, word for word, you don't actually care about your sister. You care about feeling superior to her. I said I was leaving. He stepped in front of me. I don't want to be dramatic about what happened next, because the truth of it is more mundane, and more awful than drama usually is. He grabbed my arm to stop me from walking past him. I pulled away hard, lost my balance on the unfinished flooring, and went down onto my wrist. The pain was immediate and sharp, and I sat there on the subfloor of a house I had helped finance, and I looked at my sister, and she looked back at me, and did not move. My brother-in-law said, "You should watch where you're going." He walked back outside to talk to the property agent. My sister helped me up. She said she was sorry. She said he was just stressed. She said I knew how he got. She said it the way you say something you've said many times before, worn smooth from repetition. And I realized in that moment that she was not going to be on my side. Not today. Probably not for a long time. I drove myself to the urgent care clinic in Cochrane. Sprained wrist, no fracture. I sat in the waiting room in my scrubs, a nurse at a clinic, which under other circumstances would have been slightly funny, and I texted my friend from work and told her what happened. She called me instead of texting back. That night, sitting in my car in the parking lot of the clinic with my wrist wrapped and my friend on the phone, something settled in me. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter. A decision. My brother-in-law texted me the next morning. Not to apologize. To send me a revised quote for the new property. With a note that said they needed an answer by end of week, and that he hoped I'd thought more clearly overnight. My sister texted me an hour later. She said she hoped my wrist was feeling better. She said she understood if I needed some time. She said she hoped I would still be there for them. That was all. I did not respond to either message. What I did instead was make 3 phone calls. The first was to the mortgage broker who had processed the original application. I told her I needed to understand my options for withdrawing as a co-signer on a pre-possession application. She explained the process. It was not simple, but it was possible, and it needed to happen before the final approval was confirmed and the closing documents were signed. The possession date was 3 weeks away. There was still time. The second call was to a lawyer. I'd never used a lawyer before for anything personal, and I felt strange making the appointment, like I was doing something aggressive or irrevocable. But she was calm and practical, and she walked me through what withdrawal would mean and what documentation I needed to provide. She also told me this was not something I had considered, that, given the financial contributions I had made, specifically the $32,000 down payment gift that had been documented by email, I might have standing for a civil claim if I chose to pursue one. I told her I would think about it. I am still thinking about it. The third call was to my mother. I told her what had happened at the house. I told her about my wrist. I told her about the $90,000 request. I told her that I was going to withdraw as co-signer, and that this was not a decision I was making out of anger but one I had thought about carefully, and that I needed her to hear it from me before it happened. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said that she hoped I would reconsider. That family is family. That my father would have wanted us to work it out. I said I understood. I said I loved her. I said I would call her next week. Then I emailed the mortgage broker the completed withdrawal documentation. It took 11 days for the application to be reassessed without my co-signing income and credit. During those 11 days, my brother-in-law called me twice. I did not answer. My sister texted me 4 times, progressively less warm and more urgent. My mother called on day 8 and said she'd heard things were getting complicated and could we please talk. I called her back and told her I loved her and that this was the path I was on. On day 11, the lender issued a revised decision. Without my co-signing, my brother-in-law and sister did not meet the income threshold for the approved amount. The application was declined. Under the terms of their purchase agreement, which, I found out later, my brother-in-law had pushed to sign quickly, and had not had reviewed by a lawyer, the builder was not obligated to return their deposit in the event of financing falling through past the financing condition date, which they had waived. The $35,000 deposit they had put down, money that included a significant portion of the funds I had transferred to my sister, was kept by the builder. My brother-in-law called me the evening the decision came through. I picked up, this time. He said things I will not repeat in full. He said I had sabotaged them deliberately. He said I had let my sister down. He said I would regret this. His voice was loud and very controlled at the same time, the way someone sounds when they are performing anger rather than feeling it, calculating what words will land. When he stopped, I said one thing. I said, "You grabbed me, in front of my sister, in a house I helped you buy, and nobody apologized." He hung up. My sister texted me 20 minutes later. She said she couldn't believe I had done this to them. She said she'd needed me and I'd chosen to hurt them out of spite. She said she didn't know when she'd be able to talk to me again. She said she hoped I was happy. I did not respond. That was 6 weeks ago. Here is what my life looks like now. I work my shifts. I come home to my apartment, which is small and quiet and mine. I have been slowly adding to my TFSA again, not quickly, but steadily, the way I did for years before all of this started. My wrist has healed. I sleep better than I have in almost 2 years. My friend from work has come over 3 times in the past month. Once she brought her partner, once she brought her sister, and the last time it was just the 2 of us, and we made butter chicken from scratch and ate it on my couch and talked for 4 hours about everything and nothing. I did not once feel the weight I had been carrying for so long that I had stopped recognizing it as weight. My mother and I are talking. It is careful, and it is not easy, and she still believes I should have found another way. But she is my mother, and she is grieving too, and I am trying to hold space for the fact that she lost my father and then watched her family fracture and that none of this is simple for her either. We are finding our way back to each other slowly, and I think we will get there. My sister and I have not spoken. I have thought a great deal about what I would say to her if she called. I have thought about whether I am angry at her, and the honest answer is that I'm not anymore. I am sad. I am sad in the specific way you are sad when you watch someone you love disappear into a version of themselves you don't recognize, and you don't know how to reach them, and you eventually have to accept that you can't. She is 26 years old and she is in a marriage that I believe is making her smaller, and I hope someday she finds her way out of it. I will be here when she does. But I have also accepted that being here for her does not mean being a resource for him. It does not mean my credit score, and my savings and my career stability are available for him to use as tools. It does not mean I am obligated to fund a life that he is designing, and she is quietly going along with, because it feels easier than the alternative. My father used to say, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that you can't pour from an empty cup. He meant it practically. He was an economist. He meant it about energy, about time, about what you have available to give. But it applies to money too. And it applies to trust. And once a cup has been emptied enough times, you have to decide whether to keep trying to fill it, or whether to set it down and walk away. I set it down. I don't think that makes me a bad daughter, or a bad sister, or a bad person. I think it makes me someone who finally understood that love is not the same as limitlessness. That family is not a reason to ignore harm. That when someone grabs you in a house you helped pay for and the person who should have stood beside you looks at the floor instead, that is information you are allowed to use. The life I am living now is quieter than the one I was living before. It is smaller in some ways, fewer obligations, fewer family dinners, fewer texts to answer. But it is entirely, uncomplicatedly mine, and I did not understand until recently how much I had missed that feeling. I have a trip planned for February. Somewhere warm. I have been before, but this will be the first time I've gone without watching my bank account nervously, without doing quiet math about what I could afford versus what I had already committed to elsewhere. I booked it 3 weeks ago, and I paid for it with my own money, and I felt something I can only describe as lightness. It is a feeling I intend to protect. If you are someone who is in the middle of what I just described, the giving, the asking, the slow drain that you keep telling yourself, is temporary, I want to say one thing to you. The word no is a complete sentence. It doesn't require an explanation. It doesn't require a meeting, or a negotiation, or a coffee you didn't want. It is 11 minutes of paperwork sometimes. It is a phone call that feels impossible until it's done. It is the beginning of something you won't fully understand, until you're standing on the other side of it. I'm on the other side of it now. It's quieter here. It's better.